Mark Johnston started out small, but had big ambitions, and with a steely determination that became a hallmark for both he and his horses, he soon established himself at the pinnacle of British racing, training more winners than anyone else has ever done, with a host of familiar names that will resonate with racing fans for many years to come. Mark, thank you very much for having Steve and I to Kingsley House in Middleham, a place that you've made so successful. Now, but we'd like to take you back to the beginning of your time as a racing fan, before you became a vet, and how you actually got the bug and how you actually fell into the sport of horse racing.
Yeah, well, the bug certainly came from my father. My father followed horse racing all my life, probably a lot, well, I know a lot longer than that, because he used to have his nom de plume from the days of illegal betting and used it right up to the end. Signed all his betting slips Musa after the Oaks winner. So he was always a punter, and then started buying some horses, ostensibly as riding horses for my sisters initially, but then he started breeding from these fillies that he'd bought at Doncaster Sales. And I don't know how many years he'd have bred horses for, but probably 20 years. And in that time, and he owned horses for a few years, which really got me involved. But in that time, he never bred or owned a winner at any level. So I always say that Dad taught me how not to do it.
You qualified as a vet and you actually practiced, I think, for about 3 years, is that right?
Yeah, 3.5 years, nearly 4 years.
So was there ever a potential that you would have just carried on doing that? How did you go from that to becoming a racehorse trainer?
I always wanted to be a racehorse trainer. Deirdre will say I told her I was going to be a racehorse trainer as soon as, when I first met her. And yeah, so that was always the aim. And vet, in our naivety, the family's naivety, was a means to an end. We thought that was a logical way to do it. And now I do think it is a logical way to do it. Charlie did the same. But at the time, I didn't realise until after I was in practice and trying to get into racing, I think there were only, might even only been one other vet in the UK who was training. It was Peter Calver at the time. It wasn't an accepted way to get into it, but I didn't know that until the day I phoned up the jockey club and asked for the application forms to get a trainer's license. So that's, I was sort of hooked on it from my early teens. My father had horses, or a horse in training with Paddy Chesmore, and then Paddy died and his wife Sue took over the license. I would go racing with them, sitting in the back of the car and thinking I'd rather have her job than his job. And that's literally how it began.
Oh. We'll obviously get into the horses, which is the main reason we're here to talk to you today. But it's worth obviously mentioning some of the remarkable statistics that you have compiled through your career. You became the first and only trainer to saddle 5,000 winners in Britain. That was back in August 2022. The first trainer to saddle 200 flat winners in Britain during a calendar year, which was in 2009. And of course, you repeated it a fair few times, I think in 2010, 12 to 15 and 17 to 19. The best tally of winners ever, 249 winners in 2019, more than any other trainer has achieved in a single year. When those numbers are put to you now, at this part of your life and what you've achieved, going back to the early 80s, the mid 80s, and that period when you started training, what do you reflect upon that and say?
Yeah, well, obviously I could never imagine those sort of things when I started. When we came here to Kingsley House after I'd been training for 2 years, we built 44 boxes, or 42 boxes initially, and I thought that would last me a lifetime. And I really did. It never occurred to me that I didn't look at the site and think, where were we going to put more? I now realise how naive was that, because I came here talking about training classic winners and things, and people laughed at me, and I realised they were probably right to laugh at me if I thought I could do it with 42 boxes. But in some ways, the numbers, I actually think back to those years and think that, is 1994 not even more remarkable than the 249 winners? Because in 1994, that was the first century of winners Well, we only had 63 boxes. And so the first century, I think we had 10 boxes rented up the road, so I think total of 73 boxes. And to get a century of winners from 73 boxes and £1 million in prize money and a Group 1 winner, that was really more remarkable. And and sometimes I look back and think, well, how did I do it? What did I do different then? What was better then to get so much out of so few cheap horses, really?
Steve had an interesting question about the numbers, the philosophy behind it.
I just wondered in general. We say these figures, they are impressive, but what is it you thought you bring, or you think you brought to training, which enabled you to train that volume? I mean, I hear things said all the time about training, attention to detail and working very hard. That would apply, I'm sure, to many trainers. I'm sure you'd agree. What do you think that you gave it or did that was maybe helped you achieve those sort of figures, ridiculous figures?
Yeah, I've been asked that question and questions like it about what made me so successful. How did it get from 13 horses to 200 horses? And particularly when we broke whatever the record was, 4,196 or something, people kept asking, how did you achieve those numbers? And really, at the time, I didn't know. I was speculating over it and thinking, what was it? But it's only really since Charlie took over the licence that I've started thinking more about it and what he's up against. And over all the years that I was training, from very early on, I think I was bombarded by owners complaining about the number of entries. And I also heard people, other trainers and people in the media and so on, saying that I had a scattergun approach to entries. Well, I can assure you I never had a scattergun approach to entries. It was always very, very well thought out. But I was a huge believer in multiple entries. And I'm still a huge believer in that. I think far and away the most important thing in affecting a horse's chance of winning is the opposition. And you don't know finally what the opposition is until you press the button and declare it. So multiple entries are essential. When owners used to criticise me over it, I used to point out that Aidan O'Brien has far more entries than me. And Aidan has huge numbers of entries in the top races, and sometimes they look fairly crazy at times, but there's method in the madness, and I think there was always method in the madness with me with the entries. And I think now I worry that Charlie sort of succumbs to the pressure a bit more.
Okay.
Because I'm very well aware of the costs to owners. I think I don't think it would be arrogant to say that I've argued as much as anybody about the owner's lot over the 30 years that I've been training, and I've always argued about entry fees and what it costs owners, but you can't take it away if you don't enter the races.
You'd enter a lot and you'd leave the decision as late as possible.
Absolutely.
Your finger will be hovering on the button near declaration time.
Yes. If you go back to Deirdre blames me for telling Richard Wayman all the secrets, and which I did. And she says it's my fault that these things like transparent tracking and so on came in, because we would litter in the days when most of the entries were done by phone. Well, all of the entries were done by phone, and if you were online at 10 o'clock, even if it went after 10 o'clock, you could still make the entry, and we would have 2 phones to 2 different people at Weatherby's, and one of them stalling and getting after the 10 o'clock, and the other one finding out who's declared.
Wow.
And the office used to be chaos in the run up to 10 o'clock, but great fun as well. The office staff used to say that was, in many ways, the best part of the job.
I've got this picture of Deirdre writing stuff on a note and showing it sort of in the background.
It was almost like that. She was blazing mad when he left, and I think there was one day for the Glasgow Stakes that I think I declared 5, took all 5 to Hamilton, and pulled 2 out 45 minutes before the race, finished first, second and fourth.
Right,
The right call.
Perfect.
The
yeah,
right call.
yeah. So I was a huge believer in
Okay.
in doing that, and
Yeah.
post 48-hour declarations when they came in, you know, I don't think I had as many non-runners as William Haggis, but for different reasons. I had a lot of non, and we have had a policy for as long as I can remember that we don't charge an owner for a non-runner. You know, that whatever the reason is that the horse doesn't run, the owner doesn't get charged any of the expenses. And so we would take horses to the track, you know, because if we took them to the track, there was no limit on when you could run them again. So we would take horses to the track and not run them because there was a better race 48 hours later.
Really? Okay.
Fascinating.
Okay. On to horse. First horse to mention, obviously a very significant horse in your career, your first classic winner, Mr. Bailey's. Very good too. I won the Vintage and the Royal Lodge. It was first time out in the Guineas. What were your aspirations going into his 3-year-old career? Did you think you had a 2,000 Guineas potential winner on your hands?
Do you mean literally before, the few days before the race?
Yeah, the build up to it. You know,
Yeah, we thought we were going to win.
Did you?
Yeah, we thought we were going to win. And again, you know, I don't know whether I would. We were naive in many ways. We heard stupid stories like somebody's going to nobble Mr. Bailey's, and you know, I think he was 16-1. He wasn't. You know, nobody was really interested in Mr. Bailey's. We had staff sit up all night with him at Newmarket, you know, outside his door the night before the race. We thought we were going to win the Guineas.
Wow.
And we were convinced from the last gallop at Ripon Racecourse, so which was a week or 10 days before the race, we thought we were going to win the Guineas.
And you beat a very good horse in the end, Grand Lodge, narrowly in a really good, very memorable finish.
I think King's Theatre was the one I feared most at the time. Although, you know, Frankie choosing Grand Lodge over our horse knocked our confidence a little bit.
Yeah. Good news for Jason. Following that, you went to the Dante, like so many Guineas, and the horse came third. And at the time, I know a few people thought he maybe didn't quite get the trip in the Dante. That was thought.
Can I just ask, why did you run him in the Dante?
Because I was obsessed with winning the Derby.
Yeah, fair enough.
And in hindsight, if you take me back now, knowing what I know now, he would never have run in the Dante or the Derby. And interesting, Paul Venner tells me he's got a letter, you know, longhand or typewritten or something, you know, in those days, that I wrote him to persuade him to run the horse in the Derby. And he's got no regrets because he says it was one of the greatest days of his life, finishing fourth in the Derby. But I have regrets, you know, because I think it was very much a wrong decision, and the horse got injured in the Derby, and he did run once more afterwards, but that was really the end of his career. You know, if it was now, he'd have been Irish Guineas, St James Palace.
Injury aside, which I didn't realise, still visually was a memorable run in the Derby. I mean, it was given an incredibly positive ride, and it was a great sight. Him taking Tattenham Corner.
People take the mickey out of Jason.
They do.
You know, I'm Jason's greatest fan, and you know, I often say, you know, certainly at the time, I thought he was, you know, I look back now and wonder. I had very comparatively few horses and comparatively inexperienced at the time, but I've always said Jason Weaver was the greatest front-running jockey, and certainly the best till Joe Fanning honed his skills. Because Steve Cawthon was always talked about at the time of being the greatest front-running jockey, but I thought Jason Weaver was. So I'm his greatest fan. I often hear it said that the Derby fourth was one of his best rides, and I don't think it was. Okay. I think far from it. And interestingly, you know, in those days I didn't know Willie Carson well. I know him well now. You know, I remember being a bit insulted by Willie saying that in the Derby on air, he said he looked up and saw it was Mr. Bailey's in front and knew he would beat it. And you know, I think he had more experience than I had at the time, and the horse should not have run in the Derby. Okay.
You think that actually had an effect on the rest of his career? Really?
It finished him.
Right. Okay.
It finished him.
Fair
but his out-and-out ability as a miler.
He was very, you know, to this day underrated. Obviously, he held the record for the Guineas for a very long time. I think possibly from 94 right through to 2004, he's probably the fastest horse I ever trained. Certainly the fastest horse we ever saw on the gallops here. He could have gone back and won a July Cup rather than shoot at a Derby. He was a very, very fast horse.
The next horse we'll talk about is one that was similar in the sense that he was a 2,000 Guineas horse. Did you have anyone stay up overnight to watch Bijou Dun before the Guineas?
No, I didn't. But it was a tremendous period. I think in the space of 4 years, we had a first, second, and third in the Guineas. And I think after Mr. Bailey's, we just sort of took it for granted. So Bijou Dun, I was fairly confident. I knew he was a really live contender, and but he went a different route. He went the route that maybe Mr. Bailey should have gone. Guineas and Irish Guineas, where he lost his shoe, finished fourth, then won the St James Palace.
A good St James's Palace. I think he beat 2 Guineas winners in the. Was it Ashkanani?
He beat
it was Ashkanani and Mark of Esteem.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I think you've proven.
And that's one of Jason Weaver's greatest rides.
Yes.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was. You're absolutely right. It was. Yeah. So, but you think that Mr. Bailey was probably the quicker of the two?
Quicker, certainly the quicker. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you'd gone back to 7 furlongs, there'd have been no contest.
Okay.
Yeah.
A mile? Who would you?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
fair
really
fair
know.
enough.
I might save that one for a little bit later on. Put a few others in the race.
Yeah. Well, including the next one. Maybe.
Well, can I just ask about the run behind Halling in the Eclipse?
Yeah.
Because obviously Halling was an outstanding horse the year before, and to finish second, he's only beaten very narrowly. He made Halling dig deep to win that Eclipse.
Yeah. Until that, interestingly, there was people trying to buy Bijou Dun at the time, and stud farms, and they wanted him to run in the July Cup. I opted to run him in the Eclipse, and I don't think it was a bad decision. I think at the time, I enhanced his value, rather than detracted from it. I know I did, because I know we could have sold him after that for an awful lot more than we could have sold him before it. Yeah. Did he not stay? I don't know, but I think it was a bit of a messy race. The horses were wide apart at the finish. I think we'd come across onto the softer ground, which didn't. There was a soft patch down by the pond. I'd walked the track, and I was adamant that we should stay across on the far side, not cut that corner. And Jason did cut that corner. I think that cost us a bit, but. Who knows? Maybe he didn't quite stay either.
He ended up going for the Dubai World Cup, and he got brought down. I think
he got brought down. Got brought down by our other. Oh no, was it by our other horse? No, it wasn't. It's by a Japanese horse, wasn't it?
And then he was sadly never the same horse.
Yeah,
again,
he was never the same horse again after that. Whether he was out of contention at the time he was brought down, I don't really know, because he was certainly towards the rear.
Running inside the final quarter mile, it's Attraction, but will she last it out? She kicks a length or so clear. Silka's Gift on the far side, then Hathra running on down the centre. Sundrop from Red Bloom, carry on Katie and Natalia. Attraction still holding sway, a length and a half clear of Hathra. Attraction from Hathra, Sundrop a late run on the near side. Attraction wins the Guineas.
It's Attraction and Alexander Gold Run. Kinnaird over on the far side, racing to the final furlong now. Attraction, the English Guineas winner, bidding to be the first ever to complete the double, is kicked for home under Kevin Darley, and it's Attraction now from Alexander Gold Run. Illustrious Miss is staying on, but up towards the finish, she's done it. Attraction wins the Boyle Sports 1,000 Guineas.
They run past the bushes and down inside the final quarter mile. It's Attraction in front, running down towards the dip. Chic peeps up the Rascal Tornado on the outside there. Majestic Desert, Miss Mambo well adrift. Attraction now being strongly challenged. Here comes Chic, she's a very strong stayer. In third place, Nebraska Tornado. They race up towards the line. Attraction and Chic, a battle of the pin-ups. Attraction holding on from Sheik. Attraction is pulling out all the stops. Sheik, one last lunge. Attraction beat Sheik in a great race.
Before we talk about the career, which is fantastic, and obviously we are going to talk about it, I've read and seen you talk about her before. It's an amazing story how she ever got to you to be trained. It was at various stages going to be trained elsewhere. Or
yeah, it was
not
trained elsewhere.
At all.
It was trained elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think she was Cartier Horse of the Year at the end of her 2-year-old season, or it might have been the next year. And Duke of Roxburgh made a speech, and he said it was sort of poetic justice that she went to the only trainer that might have bought her anyway if she'd gone to a sale. It was very flattering, but it wasn't true, because I wouldn't have bought her. He asked me to go and see her towards the end of her yearling year, and I went to see her at Floors because he couldn't get her into a sale. Right. She'd been turned down by both Tattersalls and Doncaster. Couldn't get her into a sale. She was very offset, and frankly, Guy Roxburgh was, rightly so, it turns out, but he was a great fan of the family. But the family had gone very cold. It looks a fantastic pedigree when you look at it now, but the family had gone very cold. She was by a cheap horse, a physio. She was extremely offset, and he asked me if I would train her for half of her, and I said no. Only first he asked me could I find somebody to lease her from him, because he wanted to retain the family, and I said I couldn't find somebody. I don't recommend owners to lease horses. It's their only hope of getting a profit is gone. And then he said, would I train her for half of her? And I said no to that as well. And I believe that he gave the same option to Tim Easterby, who said the same.
Wow.
And then he gave that option to John Hills, and John said he could find somebody to lease 3 fillies. And he took 3 fillies, I don't know what the other 2 were actually, took 3 fillies from Guy Roxburgh, and by February or thereabouts, he'd only found somebody to lease 1 of them. And the Duke of Roxburgh said he could train 1 of the other pair, but 1 was to go to Mark Johnston. And so we got her in around February or March, cantering.
Wow. And you say the rest is history, but there also, I think, are various stages during her career where it wasn't certain she was going to run again.
Very far from it, yeah. The biggest one, of course, being after she won the Cherry Hinton at 2, she was being prepared for the Chieveley Park, and she fractured a pedal bone, kicked the manger in the stable, and fractured a hind pedal bone. We had a very memorable meeting in Newmarket with vets from both Rossdale's and what's now NEH, and John Warren and the Duke of Roxburgh, and we debated whether she could be brought back for the following year. And the great concern was as much the knees. We weren't looking at x-rays of the pedal bone, we were confident that could heal, but we weren't confident that the knees, where there was a lot of bony changes and chips and spurs, and we weren't confident that they would stand the build up to training for the next year.
That's got to rank as one of the most satisfying things you've done for a horse to have suffered that injury, go through all of that, not run since the Cherry Hinton of the July meeting, and then come back for her seasonal debut in the 1,000 guineas.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know how long she would last, and so the idea was we're going for the big one first time. We're not, she might only get 1 race, so we're shooting for the stars, and so that was the logic behind it.
There was talk about her not staying as well. I remember vividly at the time, wrong. I mean, she won 5 from 5 at 2, just to remind people. And she went into the 1,000 as the best form in the race, but certainly some people were questioning whether she'd get home.
Everybody questioned whether she'd stay. And
she was quite a bold running horse.
We questioned it ourselves. But we went there. you say you asked me, was I confident about Mr. Bailey's? Or, you know, we went there thinking if she stays, she wins, because she's the best horse in the race, and that was the case, really. It was, you know,
you knew the opposition.
Yeah,
So,
we knew the opposition. No, well, I think, you know, that she was different. You know, she's one of only 3 horses in my career where I can truly say I never considered opposition. You know, that you know, we've, of her age, she was the best 3-year-old filly miler in Europe. You know, there was no doubt about it. So you had no reason to consider the opposition.
And she lasted well. I mean, in terms of all the doubt, again, we'll talk about a moment in detail, but her CV as a 3-year, she won the 1,000 guineas, she won the Irish 1,000 guineas, she won the Coronation, she won the Sun Chariot. It's not like she didn't only have the one established, she really established herself as a top drawer filly, didn't she?
She won the matron.
Was that the following year?
Yeah.
No, she won it twice.
She won it twice, of course she did. Sorry, yes,
twice,
absolutely. She did win it the following year.
She won it the following. She won at Newmarket, sorry, at the end of her 3-year-old career as well.
Yeah.
And she did a suspensory injury in Hong Kong in between.
Wow.
You know, she's certainly the horse. You said great sense of achievement. I'm more proud of training her than any other horse in my career. It's the only one where I can actually think, well, maybe nobody else would have done it.
And she turns out a good broodmare as well.
Great broodmare.
Yeah, I mean, what a story.
Yeah.
When you think about it, she nearly didn't run.
Yeah.
The difference, incredible.
And I it's one of the things that I cite it all the time. Some people don't agree with my view on it, but you know, I say that under current BHA policies of trotting up horses and things like that, she would never have been allowed to run.
No.
And how ridiculous is that? Because she's not, as you say, not just a brilliant racehorse, 5 Group 1s, you know, a contributor to the breed, an outcross that, you know, proved to be a great broodmare as well. And so horses like that are vitally important, and that she should be prevented from running. One of the thing about her injury, not her injury, you know, it was developmental changes in her knees. It's due to her conformation. She had these spurs and chips in her knees, but we were confident that yes, she might hobble off lame one day, and that will be the end. But she was no more likely than any other horse to suffer a catastrophic injury on the racecourse. And the end of her career came when she went lame behind. Now, relatively speaking, it was a minor lameness in comparison to the issues with her front legs, but we couldn't say what it was, and we couldn't say she's not more likely than another horse to suffer a life-threatening injury. You know, and so that was the end. We weren't going to run her and take the risk of any life-threatening injury, but to stop her running because of her knees would have been a travesty.
You made a point discussing the Duke of Roxburgh earlier on, talking about horses that you would buy, and I was talking to Steve about this, that I'm certain I read in an article about you back in the day when you were talking about the type of horse that you would buy at the sales, that you operated financially at a certain level, which meant that you had to buy horses with faults that you felt you could cope with. Was that am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the case, and I've got a reputation for that, which perhaps at times has not helped me. I've been sent a lot of crocs as a result. But yeah, I built a reputation for that. But it's not necessarily anything to do with being a vet, and it's not necessarily a case of saying I can cope with these faults. It's more a case of saying, well, these faults that are the average agent's assistant, you know, all they look at is, does it turn out or does it turn in? Or these are things that have got no bearing whatsoever on how fast it's going to go.
Right.
And we have learned over the years that a lot of the time they have little bearing on how sound they're going to be. And so it's more just cutting out the nonsense and sticking to the facts. You know, and there is no doubt that allows you to allowed me to buy pedigrees that I couldn't otherwise afford. I think one of the greatest examples, I remember going to Deauville sales, and we always go to a sale to this day, Charlie and I, and from the time I started, always look at the horses we want, not the horses we think we can afford. So I've looked at crazy horses over the years, horses that made millions and that I should have known before the sale that they were going to make millions, but I still look at them. And I went to Deauville sales and I looked at a colt by Dalakani out of Alexandrova. And I'm looking at him side on and I thought, I was sort of drooling over him and feeling, if I could fill my yard with horses like this, I'd be winning derbies and there. And I walked around the front and he was like that. And I thought, well, maybe I can afford him.
Yeah.
And I did. I bought him. He's called Alex, my boy. And
it's pretty useful horse.
He was a pretty useful horse. Yeah, he won a group race for us. He finished 5th in the Leger. Then Jabir Abdullah took him to Germany. Where unfortunately he died. So he never fulfilled his potential. But he was a very good horse, and it showed an example. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't put off by. Well, for the money. Yeah. He'd have been 10 times the price if he'd been straight in front.
Shamardal is gradually turning the screw and gradually increasing the advantage over his rivals, headed by Black Velvet. Then back in 3rd place is Rowan Tree. Wilco is sticking on from Berkhamsted, but Shamardal is just extending away. 5 lengths is the gap back to Wilco. In 3rd place is Rowan Tree from the back of the pack. Black Velvet, Staggery Hill once in the clear, but Shamardal has comfortably won the Verplico Vintage Stakes and is upwardly mobile. Wins by 3.
Shamardal is grinding away in front. Montgomery's Arch chasing hard. In the centre, Oratorio, and then Librettis and Tremar. But Shamardal is showing no signs of stopping, running inside the final furlong. 3 or 4 lengths clear of Oratorio. Iceman runs on, then Montgomery's Arch and Librettis. But Shamardal pouring it on, gallops on relentlessly to win the Dewhurst.
Well, you mentioned Attraction being one of 3 horses that it didn't matter who the opposition was. I'm presuming that the next horse we talk about also falls into that category, and that's Shamardal, who was quite a brilliant 2-year-old from the moment he stepped on the racecourse. But what did he show you before he went to Ayr for his debut?
I remember Joe Mercer was manager for the owner at the time, and Joe would always ask about him when he came before he'd ever run. And he was a bit of a nondescript horse. He didn't stand out from the string. He was very relaxed, easy horse. So until we galloped him, we didn't really know that he was that good. And I'm not sure if I tell the story exactly right. I know Keith Dalglish thinks my version's a bit distorted, but I say that Keith never said anything about horses after the gallop. Recently, he said that he never got a chance to say anything about horses because I'd be walking off before he could open his mouth. But I remember that I always tell the story that Keith never commented on other horses, but the day he galloped that horse on the high moor, he said that the only question with this horse is where would you like it to win, because it will win anywhere you take it. And sure enough, it did. It went to Ayr and it won. And it's a measure of how confident we were that we went straight, maiden at Ayr, straight to the Vintage Stakes, straight from the Vintage Stakes to the Dewhurst. And I never had any doubts. I've never quite forgiven Sheikh Mohammed for running him in the UAE Derby. It was a terrible, messy race. I think that the favourite or Shamardal was probably a favourite, and American Horse went off flat out, and an outsider ended up winning it. But apart from that, unbeaten in his career, he was an absolutely brilliant horse, and unbeaten at 1.25 miles as well, which was probably a bit beyond his.
He won the French Derby when
his best. Yeah.
Was it always for you? You knew you only have it as a 2-year-old. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. It was actually because it belonged as a 2-year-old to Abdullah Bouhaliba, and his horses were all taken when they were taken first to Gainsborough Stud, and then Sheikh Maktoum died and the horses went to Godolphin.
Right. But he was a brilliant driver. I think Timeform raced in 1:26p. I watched the Dewhurst again before doing his programme. He absolutely bolted up in the front.
Yeah.
He really did.
And obviously he was the same year as Dubawi,
Yeah.
and Sheikh Mohammed understandably kept them apart.
Yeah.
You know, but you have to think he'd have won an English Guineas. You know, so he was a really exceptional horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And came in this, you know, very strange to have the two horses in my yard at the same time in 2004, him and Attraction. And the great similarity was a child could lead them up. You know, they were both explosively fast horses when the stalls opened, but very, very quiet, didn't take anything out of themselves in the preliminaries. And Shamardal was, he was a very laid-back horse, and you wouldn't guess that he was so fast looking at him.
There was a time watching him, and certainly as a two-year-old, and particularly in that Dewhurst that Steve mentions, where it looks like he's doing everything so easily, which is, it sounds almost obvious to say, but he's going so well, and other good horses. I mean, Oratorio finished second, and he beat Motivator, and he was a very good horse.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't go fast enough for him.
No, he was exceptional, and as I say, they don't come along very often.
No. As you say,
and it's again, it's one of the sometimes, people always cite the examples where pedigree doesn't out, and where great horses go to stud and don't fulfil their expectations, but he has fulfilled all these expectations and more.
Yeah, absolutely.
What,
how
would you introduce the next
Well,
horse?
we're going from a very, very fast, a very classy horse to a classy horse, but very different. A golden era for you in terms of stayers, we're going to talk about next. But the horse that, in many ways, would it be fair to say you're almost most synonymous with? Even we talked about the other horses. If people were asked to mention a Mark Johnston horse, I suspect 50% of the people might say Double Trigger. Maybe not, but certainly would have done 10 years ago anyway.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, again, remind people about his qualities. I mean, anyone who follows racing will know, but it's nice to hear from someone close to him.
Yeah, well, he was conversely, he was quite a difficult horse at home. In fact, he's a very difficult horse at home. Would bite your hand off, and a real clown as a 2-year-old. We used to joke he spent more time on his hind legs than, and it wasn't just his flaxen mane and tail and all the white that made him look like a circus horse. It was the way he behaved at home, and we had very little faith in him as a 2-year-old at home. And Ron Huggins' sister bred eventers, and Ron was, it's an example where Bobby Elliott said this horse needs gelding, and I put this to Ron. Ron was having none of that. I said, the first option was send it to your sister and it can go eventing, or geld it, or we'll just run it. And Ron opted for we'll just run it. But he wasn't pleased about it, and he wasn't pleased about my attitude to the horse. And I didn't go to Redcar. It clashed with Ascot, where we had Marina Park running, and Mr. Bailey's in the Royal Lodge, and Quick Ransom in the Krug Trophy. And so I was at Ascot, and Ron Huggins' close friend Richard Huckerby persuaded Ron to come to Ascot. He wasn't going to go to Redcar. Everything was a bit negative about this horse. And it was the days before Racing UK or at the races. And I can't remember which of our runners I went out to saddle, and I came back to the little owner's bar above the weighing room and the old Ascot stand, and Ron and Richard are sitting there with a champagne bucket and glasses, and Ron said to me, he won by 20 lengths. and I thought he was winding me up because of all that had gone on before, and I wouldn't sit down and join them till I'd seen the result. I couldn't see the race. I had to walk to the other end of the stand to the betting shop to get the results. And he hadn't won by 20 lengths, he'd won by 10 lengths, breaking the track record. So It was, and so he used to. It didn't particularly change after that, because he used to work at home with a horse called Mulgai, or Millengavi, as you Englishmen would say, who was rated in the 50s or low 60s, and he was his normal working companion at home, and they would work the full 1.5 miles of the high moor, and Double Trigger would only catch him in the dying stages. Now, Ron tells me that he worked better than Mr. Bailey's at the beginning of his 3-year-old career on the grass in Middleham. I don't remember that. I do remember that Mr. Bailey's worked disappointingly for us at the beginning of his 3-year-old year, and we then took him for 2 racecourse gallops afterwards. But Double Trigger was an out-and-out stayer.
After Redcar, you didn't want him to go eventing anymore.
No, I did not. So he went to the Zeppelin and won the Zeppelin.
Yeah, he did.
Did he pick up an injury?
He picked up he did sore shins. Was just, and I think he ran in the Voltager, did he, and finished 5th or something like that, and then
to the Ledger.
And then he didn't run in the. He ran
third in the Ledger.
He ran in the Ledger, after that, then won the Italian St. Ledger, and but obviously it was when he stepped up to 2 miles.
1995.
Well, that's the most amazing thing. Again, we're talking about him, but in 1995 he won the Cigaro, the Henry II, the Gold Cup, the Goodwood Cup where he beat his brother, and the Doncaster Cup, and didn't win Stayer of the Year. That is right, isn't it?
It was, well, it was the way it was. Was it strategic choice?
I think it was.
Was Stayer of the Year based on the fact that he had run once over 1.6 miles in the Irish St. Ledger.
Yeah.
So he was classed as a stayer because he'd run in a 1.6 miles race, and he had a higher handicap rating than Double Trigger. So he was. I don't think that would happen now.
No. Okay.
But clearly he was far and away the best stayer of 1995.
He really was.
Won all the staying races.
They're all everyone available to him. The most memorable race in many ways, some of the people talk about, is the Goodwood Cup, where he beat his brother, which is a great sight if you watch it. It's a superb horse race, isn't it?
Yes.
Any lover of horse racing would think it doesn't get much better than that.
I absolutely. And obviously there's a lot of nostalgia involved in why I've sort of built this relationship with Goodwood, and why I love the Goodwood Cup so much, because it had such an effect on my early career. But I always say it's fantastic racing to watch.
Yeah.
You won't see it anywhere else in the world. You can't see racing like that, and it's good. You see all the build up in the race, and then you see this fast finish, which. And I'll never forgive Robert Forrestal, who I think is a magnificent writer, but saying that watching horses like Stradivarius and Subjectivist is like watching bicycles with flat tyres or something, he said, and that these horses are slow. I don't know which of his Goodwood Cups, but in one of his Goodwood Cups, Double Trigger ran the fastest final furlong of the meeting.
Yeah, wow.
And that's not that uncommon. I think if you looked at Subjectivist final furlong in the Ascot Gold Cup, it was very fast as well. So stayers are often running. The sprinters go so fast early on that they're slowing down so dramatically at the end. So to say that these horses run slowly is just ludicrous. At Group 1 level, they're maintaining sort of 37, 38 miles an hour throughout.
This is the variation of what makes the sport great. Sprinters are great, but stayers are great.
They're coming down towards the 2 furlong marker, and as they do so, it's the white face of Double Trigger still with the advantage from his brother now, Double Eclipse. Bullgate towards the outside, coming down towards the furlong pole, and it's the 2 brothers now, Double Trigger and Double Eclipse. Double Eclipse on the near side, Double Trigger on the far side. The 2 brothers are fighting it out. Double Eclipse on the near side, Double Trigger on the far side. It's going to be close. Double Trigger is just lengthening as they come to the line. It's going to be a photo, but Double Trigger's won it from Double Eclipse, and Camusine was third. And as they come down now past the 3 pole, it's Double Trigger the leader. Double Trigger from Double Eclipse's 4 brother, and here comes Classic Cliché under Frankie Dettori on the near side. It's Double Trigger from Classic Cliché and Double Eclipse as they come down past the 2 pole, and Classic Cliché has gone to the front now. It's Classic Cliché on the near side. Double Eclipse is fighting back. So is Double Trigger. Double Trigger's fighting back on the far side. Double Trigger's getting up and he's going to win it. At the line, Double Trigger is the winner. Classic Cliché is second. Double Eclipse is third. Fourth was Election Day.
Straightening up now at a little over 3 furlongs to go in the Goodwood Cup. Grey Shot is still there. Canon's racing, doing quickly on the near side. Double Trigger can't find much more. Yorkshire going well, followed then by Cave Tara. Celeric running a big race, racing up now towards the 2, and the leader is Canon from Grey Shot. Yorkshire now called on for an effort from Double Trigger and Cave Tara. They're clear then of Celeric and 3 Cheers down the outside. A furlong and a half left to go. Canon the leader in the Goodwood Cup. Cave Tara raising another effort. Double Trigger coming back as well inside the furlong. Can he do it? Double Trigger reaching deep for reserves of stamina. He's going to outstay them all and win his third Goodwood Cup. It's Double Trigger who goes on to win the Goodwood Cup. What a mighty performance.
I was going to ask you about the Goodwood thing, because it is. I drove up. I live not far from Goodwood. I know how far it is. It's not. It didn't seem logical to me that you'd have such a fantastic. Is it 94 winners? Certainly 90 plus winners at the big meeting.
Yeah.
It used to be Glorious Goodwood, now the Qatar Festival, and you clearly targeted it in the end with the right sort of horse. What? Was it just a love affair with the course that made you do it, or?
Yeah, and then success builds success.
Okay.
I always sort of assume that you know the right kind of horse and things to take, but it's not. I don't think. I think it's quite simply that, as with all my approach to training and placing and running off the horses, is I'm a huge believer in keeping it very simple. Mm-hmm. And so you'll actually find, people say that we excel at stiff tracks. Some truth in that, but we also do very well at Brighton. Mm. You call Epsom a stiff track. We do very well at Epsom, particularly with 2-year-olds. Hamilton, Beverley, and I think, and Goodwood, obviously. I think it's because I don't believe in tactics.
Right. Okay.
And you come to these tracks, and people build so many tactics into the way. The more complicated the track, and Goodwood is arguably the most complicated of all, and people build all these tactics into it. You get a lot of jockeys holding on to them down the hill so that they can come up the other side and so on, and losing all the momentum, losing that, and I think people overcomplicate them. The number of owners will have, the first time out 2-year-olds saying, "Oh, you can't run into Epsom; it's too difficult to track." Well, it's the same for them all. So it's I like 2-year-old races at Epsom because opposition again.
They're winnable.
They're winnable. Horses can punch above their weight at Epsom because so many people shy away from it, and so I think that's why we do well at tracks like Goodwood.
You were telling us a few moments ago before we started recording that there is one race, if there is one race that you watch more often than any others, it's the Double Trigger, Double Eclipse.
Absolutely. I just love the commentary. It's fantastic. Actually, I probably watch double, maybe that's, the same applies to me. I probably associate myself with Double Trigger more than any other horses as well. Despite the fact I say that I'm most proud of training Attraction, there's some very exciting races with Double Trigger. And the ones I watch are the Goodwood Cups. That one with Double Eclipse, and the last one was just phenomenal because he was so known by then as a front running horse, and so he dropped out of it and came again. It was just incredible.
And obviously the roar when he beat Double Trigger was something else, but the roar when he came back to beat Canon
very much
in that '97 Goodwood Cup, the crowd were
absolutely. It's the only horse I've ever been involved with where the crowd were running to the winner's enclosure to get there to see the horse coming in, and those are fantastic.
That's another great commentary actually, because it's a compliment, not a criticism. There's almost a second of surprise in the commentary because they look like
absolutely. That's what makes it a great race to watch again.
I agree.
And at the time, we all, including we all thought he was out of it. We all thought he was out of it, and so I think everybody, including the commentator, was surprised when he came back and won.
Yeah, it was fantastic, absolutely.
Yeah, and a great stare. He finished second twice in the Gold Cup as well.
Yes, yeah.
So you had a very good record in the Gold Cup anyway. Then you won it again a couple of times with one horse, Royal Rebel, who I think you mentioned to us probably an underappreciated stare.
Yeah, I think just simply on the basis that he won 2 Gold Cups, and that's, you know, it's a fairly obviously Yates won several, but you know, there's not that many horses in history who won 2 Gold Cups, and yet he's very much a forgotten Gold Cup horse.
To carry on the Gold Cup theme, horse who, because of injury, I guess he never quite got the chance to prove, but might even have been the best of the 3 with a clear run. We'll never know, it's all supposition, I know, but it's subjective, which is more recent. When he was well, that time when he won at Maidan and won a Gold Cup, he really did look a cut above most players, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely, and that's why I rate him one of the best I've ever trained. But he's very different from Shamardal and Attraction in that it wasn't from the beginning. You know, it built over a period of time, and as you say, it's only after that Dubai Gold Cup win that and maybe, you know, I was obviously thinking it when he won the Group 1 in France just before it, but that was in heavy ground, and we went into the Gold Cup in Dubai thinking, you know, maybe he won't handle the firm ground, and that was the sort of question mark there. And I think that's why he wasn't really fancied for the race by the public, because it was on such different ground from the Group 1 he'd won in France. As it turned out, it's even better on the fast ground. But so then, once we're in Dubai, you know, we went to the Gold Cup full of confidence.
This was the third of your horses, wasn't it? You thought you weren't worried about the opposition. Who was the third?
Yes, exactly that. But as I say, different from from Attraction, and Shamardal was very early in the career of Shamardal. It was right from the beginning. Yeah. But with Subjectivist, it was just in that year when he won the Gold Cup. And opposition, despite the fact that it was a Gold Cup with Stradivarius in it, so the opposition didn't concern me.
It was a formality as well. I mean, the race itself was a procession.
Yeah.
It really was.
There was all this debate about had Frankie given Stradivarius, and I thought it was fantastic in the documentary that covered the relationship between Frankie and his father, and towards the end, there's Frankie would phone his dad after races, particularly races where he thought hadn't gone well, and translated his father's saying to him, you know, don't worry about it. The only way you'd have beaten that winner was to shoot it.
Yeah, absolutely right, absolutely.
Because I remember the Gold Cup in Dubai, watching him going through the race, thinking he's going a bit too fast through the race, which afterwards I was thinking he's just a very fast 2-mile horse. Yeah,
I was very confident from down the back straight. I just thought he's annihilating them.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe how easily he was going, and in comparison to the horses behind him, and you know, Joe Fanning's not one for going too fast.
Yeah. No.
Oh, no. That was it. I was standing up on the platform when we were watching the race, watching them going down the back, and I was thinking, oh, he's doing too much here. He's going too fast. Yeah. I'm looking at who's going well behind, because I'm thinking, but he just kept that. He kept that momentum. I couldn't believe how well he was going, how easily he was going, and to some extent the same in the Ascot Gold Cup.
It was the same.
He just cantered up.
He did. He really did. It's a great shame. I mean, it just happened to with many horses over the years, but it's a real shame that it's what might have been, I think, with him. Yeah.
And you know, he was a horse that obviously I thought an awful lot of. We had his half brother, Sir Ron Priestley. You know, he was a great horse as well, and you know, a great favourite in the yard, and so it was a very conscious effort buying Subjectivist in the first place, and you know, for him to prove so good was just wonderful.
Yeah.
The next horse on our list is at the other end of the spectrum, and again precocious. So precocious that he won the Brocklesby first time up, and produced the most outstanding 2-year-old season. Ended up winning the Middle Park at Newmarket, where he beat Blue Point and Maymas, who turned out to be 2 very good sires. But the Last Lion, I wanted to include him in the chat because I loved that 2-year-old career. I love seeing horses campaign adventurously like that.
Yeah.
10th start at the Middle Park as well.
Yeah.
10th start.
Yeah, he won it on his 10th start. Was it Air Force Blues maybe who won it on his 11th start the next year or something? Which again comes back to the Aidan O'Brien will have them well entered up and do these. Is not frightened of doing these things either. But yeah, it was a very exciting time, and he's another horse that had an issue. I always say about X-rays at the sales that we're not there to buy a clean set of X-rays. We're there to buy a racehorse, and it was only after he won them in May of his 2-year-old year. On occasions he would pull out length in the morning and warm up out of it, and in May of his 2-year-old year we found a chip in his knee, and after he won the Middle Park, people started saying to us, we'd have bought that horse if it wasn't for the chip in his knee. So the chip was there in his knee as a yearling. It was still there after 10 starts. The sad thing about that was that, so after the 10 winning the Middle Park, there was a lot of competition to buy the horse, and John Brown, most of the stud farms wanted to buy him and retire him there and then, as has become the norm or not the norm, but become fairly common with these fast 2-year-olds. And John opted to sell half of him to Sheikh Mohammed because he would, or John and Megan, because they would keep him in training at 3. And when he was vetted for the sale, they passed him for stud purposes, ironically, because he ended up infertile. And they failed him for racing purposes based on the chip in his knee.
Which he'd had
Always. Since a yearling.
Yeah.
And so Godolphin said they didn't want to race him at 3, wanted to retire him straight away. And I suggested we take him to the Breeders' Cup for a swan song. And they said, fine, you can do that. We'll stand on for the purchase, but we don't want to be part of taking him to the Breeders' Cup. The insurers got wind of the fact that he'd been failed for racing purposes and wouldn't insure him to go to the Breeders' Cup.
Oh dear.
So the soundest horse in training was deemed unfit to race.
Yeah.
And this is the nonsense of, or the toughest horse in training that ran 10 times and won a Group 1 in his last start,
With the chip in his knee.
and he was deemed unfit to race.
Yeah.
How ridiculous is that?
Yeah,
Extraordinary.
indeed. 2 different horses. Do you want to go first, or Yavanas or Star?
Shall I start with Yavanas
Go on,
Pace?
Yavanas.
Because he's another Group 1 winner. At the age of 10. But an extraordinary story. with
Yes.
this
Amazing.
horse.
Yes.
When you first got hold of Yavanas Pace, what happened? What's the story of Mark Johnston meets Yavanas Pace?
Well, the owner, the late owner, phoned me and said he had these 2 geldings by accordion he wanted to send me, and Terence Keeney this is, and he then launched into all about the families, and the aim was to get black type, blah 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 blah, and I at some point was letting it go in one ear and out the other, and at some point I said, I'm sorry, I don't really train jumpers. And he was most taken aback by this, and he launched into further stories about these are not jumpers, and these and blah, blah, blah. so I phoned Michael Cunningham, I think it was, that trained the horse, and because I thought this was all a bit strange. This man wants to send me these 2 geldings by accordion. And he said, "Oh no, he's a wonderful owner. Yeah, you must take the horses." And so I took the 2 horses. One arrived; it was like a big police horse, and the other one was this wiry chestnut 6-year-old, I think, or 6 or 7-year-old, and I didn't think an awful lot of it, and I sort of maybe I'd sort of forgotten, the whole history of the horse, and then it was going very well on the gallops, and I entered it to run at Beverley, and I put it down for stalls practice. And Brendan Holland, who was one of our yard managers at the time, came and he said to me, "You've put Giovanna's pace down for stalls practice." And I said, "Yeah, well, it's nearly ready to run." And he said, "Yeah, but it's run, what was it, 9-10 times before or something." So I'd forgotten all about its form. I just thought, we've got this horse that's going quite well. And sadly, the owner died, and the horse didn't make that first start. And his son John took over the ownership and managing of the horse, and the rest is history to some extent. He climbed through the ranks to eventually win a Group 1, but he was a seriously,
you told us a great story about the Harbour. You must repeat that. It's a great story.
Obviously he made rapid progress, the horse, and he was entered in the Hardwick. But when he came to me, he'd come with this reputation, and in the first few races, John had kept reiterating that he must have soft ground and he needed to be held up and come from the back. I remember Eddie Lai riding him in the Hong Kong Trophy at Sandown, and didn't speak much English, Chinese jockey, and he would try to explain to him about this, but I had to hold him up, and when the cutaway came at Sandown, he just hit the front and won, despite having been told to sort of wait till he could see the winning post. But then he'd climbed through the ranks and he was entered in the Hardwick, and John didn't want him to run because the ground was fast. And I had to persuade him and tell him that, explain to him about Royal Ascot only comes once a year and you might never ever get another chance to run, and it might rain, and had all the arguments for why he should run the horse, and he eventually agreed, and Darrell Holland took the ride. And we also had Fruits of Love under Olivier Pellier in the same race. And Darrell, no instructions as usual. I always tell jockeys just, take it as it comes. And Darrell jumped off and straight into the lead. And I was cringing. I was standing on my own in what was the old owners and trainers stand at Ascot, and John was somewhere behind me. And I'm thinking all the way down the back straight, he's going to think I talked him into running this horse here because I wanted it to set the pace for Fruits of Love. And he came into the home straight and went clear. And I can't really remember how far out it was, but the next thing I hear John behind me shouting and screaming for his horse, and almost immediately afterwards, Fruits of Love starts to come out of the pack, and I hear Deirdre, not far away, shouting and screaming for Fruits of Love, and I think, what on earth am I going to say to the man? And sure enough, Fruits of Love gets up and beats, I don't remember what the distance was, but it wasn't much. He got up close to the line to beat Giovanna's pace, and I was almost horrified at this, and turned round, and there was John Keeney with Deirdre in a bear hug, jumping around. He was over the moon to come second, and I was later to find out that was the attitude of the owner, and it made the horse, a real pleasure, one of the most pleasurable I've ever had to train, because there was never a negative side to getting beaten, or it was always, where are we going next? And I think that I told you that the end to that story was that at the end of that season I went to Doncaster, and in the old betting hall there was a man selling pictures, and I saw a painting of the finish of the Hardwick. with Fruits of Love and Giovanna's Pace fighting out the finish. And I can't remember whether I asked about buying it or anything, but I asked, could we use this painting on our Christmas card that year? And the guy said he would find out, and he came back saying, yes, you can use it, but you must give credit to the artist on the Christmas card. So we did that, sent out all our Christmas cards, and not long after Christmas there was a knock at the door, and I went there, and there was the man from Doncaster with the original oil, bought for me by John Keeney, the owner of the second. And so it's got pride of place on the wall here, and I look at it all the time, and it's just, he was a fantastic horse, and difficult horse, really difficult at home. And another amazing thing about him was he dumped, I can't remember all the jockeys, I think it was either Michael or Richard Hills, one of the Hills brothers, he dumped going out onto the racecourse once. Olivier, he dumped going onto the racecourse several times, and so on occasions he would get loose before racing, and when he got loose he always won. And from that, John got to John would tell, now he might be withdrawn, John would tell the jockeys when going out at certain tracks where, like, actually I think this came about after winning at Leicester, where he got loose and galloped all the way to the start round the wrong way, and John would tell the jockeys, if it was a short route to the start, to pretend that they'd been run away with and go the long way to the start, because the horse needed this big warm up beforehand. But as you say, nowadays it might be withdrawn for.
Well, it's the age of 10 he won that Group 1 in Cologne under Keith Dalgleish. I mean, that in itself, just to hear a 10-year-old winning a Group 1 race, is a remarkable fact.
Yes, absolutely.
There are obviously lots of horses that don't get a mention, Mark. Group 1 winners, horses that a lot of racing fans will know very well. There's Jukebox Jury, Nahood, who was a very good filly, Princely Air, top 2-year-old, Pearl of Love, Orzan, who won the middle part, Lumiere, Gear Up, who was a horse I really liked, who won a Group 1 at 2. I backed him for the Derby, things didn't work out. Horses that didn't quite make it at Group 1 level, but I think they earned a place in a lot of racing fans' affection. A horse like Fruits of Love, for example. I mean, when you hear some of those names, would there be one or two that you'd like to
Fruits of Love, possibly, probably the best horse I ever trained that didn't win a Group 1. And I won 2 Hardwicks. One of them, the one that where he beat Giovanna's Pace, won what's now called the Shima Classic, was then the Dubai Turf Classic. So a really great horse and a great yard favourite as well. The amazing story about him was getting turned upside down in the horse box on the way back from Dubai, which would be between the 2 Hardwicks. So he just having flown into Heathrow, coming off the M25 onto the slip road for the M1, and the horse jumped over the partition and fell into the groom's compartment, upside down. The groom's compartment, which only had a little people door on the outside, so no way to get the horse out of there. And quite a long story, but suddenly the box driver we were all panicking as to how we were going to get vets and fire engines and things there. We'd already called the police and the fire brigade, and the box driver said, well, the Royal Veterinary College is just 2 junctions round the M25. So they reversed back up onto the M25, and fire brigade and police were told the horse was going to the Royal Veterinary College. They drove in there. There's in operating theatres, they have an overhead rail for winching the horse into the recovery room, and that rail goes out into the yard in case the horse doesn't survive and is taken out there to be dispatched. And so they took the horse box up to the side of this. An anaesthetist called Sarah Freeman was lifted in between the horse's front legs, gave him a general anaesthetic, and the fireman cut the side out of the horse box, lifted him out into the recovery room, and he just had a small cut on his head. Next run was in the Hardwick, and the London Fire Brigade came. That was
a lovely story.
It was a great story.
Wow. Well, that's definitely one to remember. I hope people at home enjoyed that. Happy ending as well. But a fair few horses that I think created quite an impression for fans of racing, including a couple that Steve and I have picked up on. Steve, you want to talk about one horse?
Well, you said right at the beginning about one of the things that the reason that you try to do a lot of winners is you've got to be in it to win it, so you make entries. But I thought a horse in some ways typifies that at a lower level. But I do think Star Rage is a remarkable horse and deserves an honourable mention. I read originally, looking up the fact that in Wikipedia it tells you it won 9 handicaps in a year, in 28 runs. But you actually delve into a bit more. He won his first handicap on the 4th of May of 39. He won his 9th handicap on the 10th of August of 71. So to break it down, he won 9 handicaps. He ran 18 times in 14 weeks, winning 9 handicaps and improving a stone and a half. And at a different level, you must be proud of that. And the horse must have been tough. I mean, because he was going to win a county hurdle for another trainer later on. He was a tough horse.
Absolutely, and won one of my only, was it 4 jump races, being the Fighting Fifth at Newcastle. But yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah,
he was the yard's sort of easy ride for if I remember Rosie Venner, Paul's daughter, came and she would ride out on him, and so he was a very, very easy horse to train at home, belonging to David Abel. In those days, we would target that Channel 4 trophy for the horse to win the most handicaps in a season. I think we maybe also won it around the same time with a filly called Shirley Rose. I think she maybe won it. So yeah, it's something we would target. But was it Star Rage that? It's either Star Rage or another of the owners. No, it must have been Star Rage who ran at Bath one day and won at Beverley the next day, less than 24 hours later.
I'm sure that's true.
So we would think nothing of that in those days. Why shouldn't they run?
Well, he ended up running for years after. So he ended with a career, incidentally. I do think he ran 137 times in his career, and he won 28 times, including 7 hurdle races. In its own, he wasn't a Group 1 horse, but he was a pretty good horse for horse racing, I think.
We've had many horses like that, Firefighting one in more recent years, and I'm a huge believer that these horses don't run all those races because they're inherently tough or born tough. They are tough because they run all those races. And it's the regular racing and regular conditioning of the bone and that keeps them like that. And it makes a mockery of the sort of practices and ideas of long gaps between races, and I've heard recently the Germans moving to say that horses can't run at 2, and that it's really important to gallop regularly to keep the bone right.
Just picking up on that, he ran on 9th of August at Bath over 2 miles and a furlong, finished second, beaten a neck by a horse called Chucklestone, and then the next day he ran over 2 miles at Beverley on the 10th of August, where he beat Thunderheart by a head. He had 9 days off and he came out and finished second at Chester. And then 3 days later he ran at Nottingham and finished third. And all those races over 2 miles, the latter one over 1 3/4. So.
Which obviously it's a lot more difficult over longer distances, and so that makes it remarkable as well. Although we've seen it this winter, Charlie doing it with Artisan Dancer. That again, keep him on the move.
Well, it had no lasting effect on him. I think that was early in his career. He still had another 100 starts to go.
Absolutely.
And on a similar sort of theme, Branston Abbey was a horse that I really enjoyed watching her career. She had 97 runs in total. She won 25. There was one spell where she won 5 races in the space of 4 weeks. But also pretty classy as well. She was.
Yes, well, that's the big difference, because she was a high-class horse. I think she once won twice in the space of 2 weeks. So I think she ran Saturday, and she'd come second in the Group 1 at Haydock in between. So she was running at the highest level and still managed, obviously over sprinter miler distances, but. She was remarkable, and some of it because it's the same owner, same policy.
They've passed the two, and it's Quick Ransom in the lead. Quick Ransom going on by about a length. Here through in second place is Briar Creek, and that one's finishing well. They've got a furlong to go in the Tote Ebor, and it's Quick Ransom pressed on the outside by Briar Creek, and it's Briar Creek and Quick Ransom. Quick Ransom and Briar Creek with Steerforth eating up ground with a run star player, but at the line, Quick Ransom just takes it from Briar Creek and Steerforth.
1992 was a memorable year for you, and two horses that made an impression. Marina Park, who was a very smart filly, and a horse who won a series of top-class, tough handicaps, Quick Ransom.
Yeah, I think 92 was the breakthrough year. Obviously, Mr. Bailey's winning the Guineas in 94 took us to another level, but 92 was the really important year. Marina Park giving me my first group winner in the same race that gave Charlie his first group winner. So that was very important, and Quick Ransom winning the Eber. And I was at the time, as I say, I was desperate to be noticed. I was desperate for interviews and to get on television, and we didn't have anything like the same media coverage because it was all terrestrial TV only. And I remember that day. I think it's one of the things I always talk about, the great interviewers and presenters that I've come across in my time. And that day when I won the Eber and I was interviewed by Bruff Scott, and I always remember it because for the first time I was sort of lost for words. I didn't know what to say, and Bruff, obviously the interview was going nowhere, and Bruff said to me, the horse has just come down from Middleham, it's not far away. What advantage is that to be training where you are? And it just brought out a whole new topic to talk about. And obviously there's some great interviewers who bring, Derek Thompson being the daddy of them all, who bring out the best in the subject. And I'll always remember that day and what Bruff did for me in helping me get my message across. And and I think you can try and do as much as you like in a Made in the Air or something, but winning the Eber and getting that interview was a big breakthrough moment for me. And we got our first, not Sheikh Mohammed, but Darley stud horse for Saeed Manana at the end of that year. And so I really think Quick Ransom, who won at the time, I think, all the most valuable handicaps in Europe, and didn't get any black. It's one of the issues about the pattern and the black type system, that the horse didn't get any black type till his last start, where he was third, I think, in the Doncaster Cup, before going to Australia, where he was then third in the Melbourne Cup, not for me, but the following year. So a very, very good horse, I think rated ultimately about 110 or something, and didn't get small black type till his last start in Britain. So, but a really good horse.
So many memorable names amongst the horses that we recall, but there are also a lot of people that have made the success story of Mark Johnston. But the riders are the ones that a lot of us at home will remember. I mean, Steve and I have made a list, but I don't think we've even scratched the surface of the number of riders that you relied upon at certain periods. I mean, Jason Weaver, we obviously mentioned, Joe Fanning, Franny Norton, Sylvester de Souza, Keith Dalglish, Kevin Darley, Michael Roberts, Bobby Elliott, who you spoke about so effusively earlier on today when we were chatting to you off camera. Just take us through some of those names and some of those contributors.
I think it's very different now because it's sort of taken for granted now that we're using top jockeys, and Joe Fanning's been around for so long, and to be fair to him, he came and he was willing to play second fiddle to a few of these jockeys along the way till he worked his way to the front, and he didn't immediately get thrown into the pole position. So I can't underestimate the contribution that people like Joe have had over a long period of time. But I suppose it's the early ones that were sort of career changing, or were associated with some of those breakthroughs. And I always say Jason was a fantastic. Probably at the time I had more confidence in my jockey than at any other time in my career. I didn't have any desire to use anybody else or any. And I used to love this. It really clicked with my style of how I thought races should be run. I used to often feel with Jason, I'd be watching the horse go down the back straight, and he would just open it up a bit, and I'd see jockeys starting to push behind, and I'd be thinking, I've won the race and there's 4 furlongs to go. So, and I remember Kieran Fallon telling me that he rode for Linda Ramsden at the time, and that it used to frustrate him no end because his standard instructions were to sit at the back. And he said he would look up and see it's Johnston Weaver in front and think, well, I can't beat them any other way than being there ready to cover his move. And we won so many races quite a long way out, and I loved that period, you know. And you know, Bobby Elliott, who many people today will never have heard of, perhaps. He lives just up the road. I got very, very lucky that I stumbled upon Bobby Elliott in my first years of training. I rode my first winner by accident because I got left without a jockey when Ray Guest was unwell, and that wasn't. It was Bobby's first ride for me was when Ray Guest was unwell, and then I said to him, he finished 3rd or 4th in the filly, and I said, if you'll come down and ride out in Lincolnshire, you can ride my other horse, which runs next week. And he did, and he won on Hinari Video. And then he was instrumental in his coming to see Kingsley House, you know, and because he lived just in Leyburn down the road. But Bobby was a jockey that had been Joe Mercer's sort of sidekick through many years. He'd ridden top class horses, and he had the right attitude to it. You know, I wanted to train top class horses, and he knew all about riding them and galloping them, and he taught me an awful lot, and had he had a great influence early on, and he was just a fantastic rider to watch on a horse. So at home, he had a very big influence early on, and as I say, that was very lucky. Most small trainers can't get a jockey with that level of experience. But then, as you say, over the years, there's been so many. You know, Kevin Darley, champion jockey, and great to work with, really great with his staff, and Michael Roberts. I think we mentioned we had a lovely relationship with Michael Roberts, and riding Fruits of Love in Japan. We had great fun with Michael Roberts, and I had a great deal of faith in him as well. And I think he had he had a great deal of confidence in the horses, and I think that's the most important thing with a jockey, is they must have confidence in the horses. Sometimes you can have the greatest jockey and he just doesn't click with you, or she doesn't click with you.
It's really struck me, listening to you speaking throughout this entire conversation, the great affection that you've held, not just obviously for the people that you work with, but with the horses as well, which is not something that is immediately obvious when you're watching you on the racecourse, because you're so into it. And it's actually quite refreshing and lovely to hear.
Well, you're being very kind, but I always say actually that something like this, you reminisce and you think about all these great times and these great horses that gave us those great times. But on a day-to-day basis, people are always, they'll say to Deirdre, what's your favourite horse? And she always has a favourite horse. She'll have a horse, it's her favourite horse today, and it's the one she rides, and she knows all about it, and everything. Whereas they say to me, what's your favourite horse? It's whatever's winning at the moment.
Fair enough.
And as I say, the Attraction is the standout, because I think she, I'm really proud of training her, because there were so many issues along the way, and there's so many opportunities when you could have said, no, this has had enough. And the owner was fantastic as well. It would be after she won the Hillary Needler and went to the Queen Mary that virtually from then on he would say to the jockeys every time, just go out and enjoy it. She owes us nothing. Everything's a bonus. And that was absolutely right. You know, she came and the first target was win a race.
Yeah.
Then try and get some black type, and then it was just, the sky was the limit.
Fantastic.
And it was just such a great time. So,
Yeah.
you know, really good fun, and we were all proud of her.
Speaking of being proud, I imagine there's a great deal of pride for you now watching your son Charlie at the helm. You're still a big part of it all. But I read an article where you were talking about one of your biggest regrets is that your father, who you started speaking about at the start of this conversation, didn't get to see the great success of the training career of Mark Johnston. If we were to look back on it now and you were able to hear his thoughts, what do you think?
I really don't know. I just don't know what he would have, you know, I don't know if he could ever have imagined it all. Just when you said, obviously, he died in September '93, so just, you know, just the Guineas winner 6 months later, or 8 months later. So, you know, he missed out on us really turning the corner. So I don't know what. I suppose he would have seen the Eber winner. You know, things would have, you know, had really started to pick up. I don't know what he'd have thought of it all. I remember him trying to console me one year with saying, "You've had so many seconds, and it's actually harder to have a second than it is to have a winner." I don't know where he got that from. So, you know, he certainly loved it all, but you know, I have to admit that, as you say, he taught me how not to do it.
Perfect.
Well, what he taught you and what you have done has been remarkable.
Thank you.
Just the most amazing numbers, obviously, but also some wonderful stories, wonderful memories, and we are privileged to be sitting here talking to you about it. And on behalf of racing fans who've enjoyed it over the last 30 plus years, 35 years, it's been a privilege watching the career of Mark Johnston. Obviously, it still goes on in a certain way. You're still a big part of the team here, so we're still enjoying you when we see you on the racecourse. But thank you for everything that you've done in the sport of racing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for reminding me of it all.